With us now is Bridget Phillipson, Chair of the Labour Party and also Minister for Women and Equalities. Good morning.
Hello, good morning.
Turnout in this election for a by-election was pretty substantial, over 44%. Nigel Farage won even more votes than he did in 2024. He got 63% of the vote. It shows significant political appetite in Clacton for Reform UK. Nigel Farage has, in this case, won the argument, hasn't he?
Well, he forced a by-election he didn't need to have. He stood again. He spent most of the summer chasing a bin around Clacton, and now he's going to come back to Parliament and have to answer some very serious questions he's been seeking to dodge, distracting and deflecting from the £5 million dodgy so-called gift, his connections to a convicted fraudster. You know, the scandal just keeps piling up. And now he's through that by-election, there's no hiding place.
But the scandal you talk about is already now in the public domain, and the people in Clacton know about it. And in spite of that, they've had their say, and they have overwhelmingly backed him.
And that's absolutely their right. But now he's through that process, I think we should all expect to hear a lot more from Nigel Farage, setting out the full detail to the public of exactly what's gone on. If he's got nothing to hide, then he won't have any problem with answering questions, something he's just consistently refused to do, including during this by-election.
You sound very frustrated by the mechanics of this by-election. Yet Nigel Farage says the major political parties, including your own, showed contempt towards the electorate by opting out. Was it right not to give the 7,500 Labour voters in Clacton no candidate to vote for?
Look, we were never going to play any part in this ludicrous farce that Nigel Farage has insisted upon, and I think there is a danger of normalising the absurd here. Nigel Farage was the Member of Parliament for Clacton, decided for reasons best known to himself that he was going to force a by-election. Now he's been re-elected, so he can come back to Parliament, he can speak to the public, and he can set out all of the details about this £5 million gift, about when he decided he was going to come back as Reform leader, about his connections to a convicted fraudster. There's more. I could give you an even longer list of all.
But as I mentioned, the voters in Clacton know about all of that, and they voted for him. And I've spent time in Clacton, not that much time, but a couple of days in the last few weeks. I'm going again today. And many voters say, you didn't put up a candidate at the Labour Party because you knew you weren't going to win. This is part of an establishment stitch-up. And I wonder if you've helped, the Labour Party have helped in the minds of those voters to solidify that view.
But why on earth should we or anybody else dance to Nigel Farage's tune? Just because he decides he wants to waste taxpayers' money having a by-election in his seat doesn't mean any of us should feel responsible for being a part of that. But what I would say, in addition to the fact that Nigel Farage is a Member of Parliament for his constituency, he's also seeking to be the next Prime Minister of our country. So this isn't just about the people of Clacton. They have a right to vote for the person they feel best placed to represent them. But this is somebody putting themselves forward to be the next Prime Minister of our country, and in those circumstances it is absolutely right that he sets out all of the detail as to what's been going on, all of these scandals,
and the investigation
that are piling up.
So I imagine we will get some of those answers. There could then be, there's quite a lot of process that has to happen there, another by-election. I wonder if Andy Burnham is the great sort of threat to Reform UK in another by-election in Clacton, where I believe you would stand a candidate, how do you think you would fare?
There's a lot of water that has to run under the bridge before we get to that point, and I won't be commenting.
But you would be standing a candidate if there was another by-election before a general election in Clacton?
What I won't comment on is what might or might not happen through the process that takes place in Parliament around understanding members' responsibilities. It's not appropriate for me to do that. But of course, we fight by-elections. We take that incredibly seriously. But we're not in that situation in terms of that process that you've just described. And I think what matters most, now that Nigel Farage has been re-elected, is that he finally comes clean to the public.
Keir Starmer said when this by-election was called, who was then Prime Minister, politics should be about improving the lives of millions of people, not personal gain. I wonder, was the Makerfield by-election not for personal gain?
There was a very different set of circumstances there. So we had the sitting Member of Parliament taking a decision to stand down, and then that by-election arose out of it. Andy Burnham was elected as a Member of Parliament and then has gone on to become leader of the Labour Party and Prime Minister. It wasn't a situation where the sitting MP forced a by-election only to seek re-election. I think they're two very different propositions.
I guess it was a by-election forced for another candidate in the same party to win the same by-election. Recently, the Health Secretary has criticised to Keir Starmer's leadership style. This is now Yvette Cooper. She said Labour had not done government very well under Keir Starmer's leadership. Is she right?
Look, we certainly didn't get everything right. No government ever does. But I'm incredibly proud of what we've achieved in the last 2 years, whether that is lifting children out of poverty, expanding rights for people at work, giving more protections for renters. But I'm also really proud and excited that as we move into this next phase of government, we're focused on delivering for the British people, and that's what Andy Burnham has been clear about.
Let's look at some of Andy Burnham's promises. Earlier in the summer, the government announced it planned to convert 3 former RAF bases in Oxfordshire, Suffolk and North Yorkshire to house asylum seekers. All 3 of those bases are near small villages, and if approved, the number of asylum seekers will significantly outnumber the local population. Has a decision been made on those bases?
I think using former military bases is an appropriate use of those resources in order to make sure that we can hold people prior to removal from the country.
For those bases, has approval already been given?
I'm afraid I can't comment on the exact 3 cases, but yes, it is, I think, a perfectly reasonable approach from the government to use former military bases to accommodate asylum seekers and those who we may be seeking to remove from the country. The alternative, of course, is that we find private rented accommodation in communities across the country. That is an alternative. It's something that the last government pursued with some vigour, and unfortunately that can lead to some problems sometimes. It shouldn't, and people should be not face abuse because of who they are, but it can put pressure on communities, and actually having purpose-built self-contained accommodation can often be a much more appropriate way of making sure that we're dealing with people who've come to this country and are making a claim for asylum.
I believe in 2 out of the 3 of these sites, you're using an urgent planning process, which sounds very technical, but just to explain, that means that the process goes to the Housing Secretary, not to local planning authorities. With those local authorities, are you consulting with local areas about this, or are you simply telling them it's happening?
None of this is ideal, and this underlines the importance of getting on top of both of illegal migration, of the action that we've been taking to remove foreign national offenders so that we don't end up having to use so much of this kind of accommodation in order to house people. Of course, local authorities will have a role to play in terms of being consulted about what's to happen, but I'm afraid sometimes there are decisions that have to be taken nationally in order to manage what is a national problem.
But there's a contradiction, isn't there? This is what one of your colleagues, the Labour MP for South West Norfolk, said. The risk for the current government is you are focusing, we've heard so much about this in the last few weeks, on devolution and power to local communities, but this process is opposite to that. There's a contradiction in your approach. That's from one of your own colleagues.
Look, I do believe in making sure that decisions are taken closer to local people, whether that's on transport or skills or much more besides, but there are sometimes national considerations that also have to be taken into account, and dealing with the big backlog that we faced around asylum claims, dealing with the number of foreign national offenders that we need to remove from this country, that's a national challenge for national government, and every part of the country will have to play its part in that.
So local authorities will be told they will have asylum seekers coming to military bases by them, and you will hear their feedback on that, but you're not going to overturn a decision based on what a local authority says.
We do need to balance the important kind of considerations around impact on local communities alongside the national imperative to make sure that we are providing appropriate accommodation and that we're able to remove people who've got no right to be in this country. That is what the British people would expect.
Thank you very much for your time. Bridget Phillipson, Labour Party Chair. Thank you.